Hey, what's going on? Dr. Medic here. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. For those who don't, welcome. Assuming this is released on time, it is currently January 10th, 2025, which is an important date. Why? Well, because I posted my first ever video on this channel back on January 10th, 2015, or exactly a decade ago. So I've been on this platform for a while. While my content has changed over time, going from Half-Life to COD, to TF2 to COD again, Doom sprinkled in there, Quake, Blood, and even baseball for a short period, I still have been posting since that day, except for a small hiatus between June 2018 and June 2020, where I only posted one video. Anyway, every year since 2021, I like to make a special anniversary video, for anniversaries obviously. This year is going to be slightly different. For those who know me, I make TF2 videos, that's what grew my channel the most, that's what I enjoy making the most. But some OGs may remember that I also like to talk about fitness as well. I'm an athlete as well as an avid gym goer. I have often combined these two concepts into previous videos of mine, such as how much can TF2 mercenaries lift, or how fast can the TF2 mercenaries run a mile. Though I rarely ever just talk about fitness on its own, except in community posts. And I'm sure most of you have not seen those. So this is going to be that video. This is going to be the video that is aimed at those who are just starting out or want to start. I will be talking about pretty much everything you need to know while presenting a TF2 video in the background, as well as pictures, PNGs, or videos of mine to demonstrate what I'm talking about. I know a good bit of you have probably already started going to the gym or are avid gym goers, but I know a kind of scary amount of you aren't. So hopefully this can kind of help you and get you started on your journey. I will say my word is not gospel, obviously. Even I myself am still learning after 3 or so years of dedicated lifting. That's real dedication, skipping maybe 1 or 2 workouts due to sickness, that's it. And 6 years of working out, in quotes, experimenting on my own and learning from coaches of mine. So I've been in this for a while. I'm going to try to give you the best information possible. And I'll try to present this video in chronological order, and we'll provide chapters if you'd like to skip ahead. I've been talking for long enough. We're already 2 minutes into this. Let's just get into this, starting with chapter 1. Alright, so if you're watching at this moment, you either haven't started working out, but you want to, have started working out for a couple of weeks, but you're struggling, or you're just being a G by watching this despite being an avid gym goer already. Or maybe you're here to critique what I have to say, that's completely fine as well. Let's start off with one of the most common things I hear: starting is the hardest part. This to me is absolutely true. The hardest part of getting into fitness is just building that habit, building that routine of bettering yourself. I think a few of us who have been going to the gym for a while or have been working out in some capacity for a while kind of forget about this. Starting out, though, can be a very daunting task, whether that's because of misconceptions about what fitness is, insecurities, or a perceived lack of time. I don't say any of that to scare you. I say that to let you know that once you get over that initial hurdle, that first little bump, it does in fact become easier, just like that one BoJack Horseman quote. Maybe not literally, but by that point, you will have been equipped with the knowledge and mental fortitude to be able to handle it and possibly even enjoy it and thrive in it. I lift heavy-ass weight 5 days a week. Believe it or not, though, I enjoy doing it because I've done it for so long. It's part of my routine. It's just what I do. And if you yourself continue working out and just having it be part of your day, it will become routine for you as well. Just like brushing your teeth, I hope, or making food. Some of you may be saying, where do I start? I got you. Everyone is a little bit different, obviously. I and many others have experimented for months, even years, trying to figure out what a good plan is. Some of you may play sports and will be introduced that way, but a lot of you probably don't, or don't anymore, or are too young to start working out with a club or a team or whatever. So there's 2 main ways of going about this. You can either start with step 1, or start with step 0. Step 1 is just ripping off the band-aids, so to speak, and going straight to the gym. That's completely okay if you like. You probably see results a little bit quicker, but it can definitely be nerve-wracking, especially if you don't have a buddy with you. That's another key point I really want to touch on, is that if you have a friend who goes to the gym or works out, don't be afraid to ask them, because if they're an avid gym goer, unless they're just a complete dickhead, they will help you out, and they'll probably want to help you out. They'll enjoy doing it. And like I said, if they don't, they're probably not good friends anyway. If you think it would be better for you to start just going to the gym and that's how you want to approach it, skip to the next chapter. Though if you're on the fence or you want to start off a bit easier, something more simple, stick with me as I go over step 0. I think step 0 is heavily underrated by a lot of people. However, those who have been working out for an extended period of time know that this is a solid way to approach fitness. You see, an issue with a lot of people is when they get into fitness, they sort of just jump right into it without really knowing what they're doing, which is kind of what you have to do in a way, and I'll talk more about that in the mentality section of this video. But what I mean is they start going for runs early in the morning. They get up at 4:30 in the morning and run 2 miles. Or they go to the gym for 3 hours a day, or they do double sessions. They go 7 days a week. They go from basically 0 to 100, and this just completely burns them out. Most people cannot do this. While, we like to say, oh, you gotta be tough, you gotta be able to do this, this is what fitness is about. It's really not. Okay? Most people can't do it. Sure, you got your David Goggins who could run on broken feet, but most people they can't approach fitness this way. So the better way of doing it is starting out with home workouts with mostly body weight exercises. This is what I did, and this is what a lot of other people I know did, and it's great. Why is that great? Well, because it allows you to build a foundation before stepping foot in an actual gym. This allows you to get used to certain movement patterns, as well as strengthening muscles and tendons before actually lifting weights or using machines. Sure, it will be a little bit slower, but it will be very beneficial in the long run. Okay, I'll do home workouts with predominantly bodyweight exercises. Now what? What kind of exercises? How often? How long? These are all extremely important questions. People, when they start to work out, feel like they need to go to the gym for 3 hours a day, every day, or do 1,000 push-ups, run 10 miles, do 3,000 crunches just to get fit. This isn't an exaggeration. I've heard very similar lines to this in my time in the fitness community and even in real life. There's a lot of misconceptions which I hope to clear up throughout this video. To be honest, if you're brand new to working out, I know a ton of people are going to disagree with me, but just try to work out like 2 to 3 times a week for 10 to 20 minutes. Find a bodyweight workout program online. There's plenty of them. I'll try to link a few in the description that I found or leave my own original exercises down below. You'll need to do some experimenting. But for the first, let's say 2 or so weeks, don't feel like, oh, I should be doing more. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should be working out for longer. I should do this, whatever. For these first few weeks, you just have to kind of get used to the movement patterns. Do them to the best of your ability. Find what works for you. Modify some exercises if you must. Can't do a push-up? Put your knees on the ground and try them now. Can't do a pull-up? That's okay. Grab a chair, jump up, and work on trying to go slow on the way down. If you got a resistance band, even better. Use this to help pull yourself up. And if you got several resistance bands, you can kind of slowly increment to the lighter and lighter resistance bands. That may sound like a ton of information, but it's really not. 2 to 3 times a week, just dedicate 10 to 20 minutes trying to learn these patterns to the best of your ability. Really work on trying to get really good form above all else. You don't need to worry about, oh, I need to do 20 push-ups in a row. You should worry about getting really good push-ups, getting your chin to the ground, making sure your entire body moves as a single unit, making sure you don't feel it in the wrong spot. You shouldn't really get much joint pain from these exercises. I also recommend, if you're doing push-ups especially, you should get either a contraption that allows you to have a neutral wrist or just do fist push-ups. I know some people are against those, but don't ruin your joints, okay? Do the best you can to keep your joints healthy. Try experimenting with hand width when you're doing push-ups or feet placement when you're doing crunches, and really try to feel the muscle that you're working. You may or may not feel sore afterwards, and this is completely fine. This method is slow and steady. You also want to introduce some form of cardio if you don't already. I do not recommend buying a treadmill right away or trying to complete a half marathon without ever conditioning. What's the best thing to do, especially if you're overweight, is walk. Walk around, go to the park. Park further from your school, job, or the store when you go to the store. Every little bit counts. It's a compounding effect. You do a little bit a lot of times. While the changes you make in that moment are negligible, it will start to exponentiate over time the more you do it. I recommend a couple times a week before or after work, whenever you just have time, go for a 20-minute walk or so. If you want to run, that's fine too, but if you're brand new, it's best to walk so you don't stress your body too much. Or if you like swimming, you can also do something like swimming, or if you have an elliptical and you enjoy it, do that. If you don't have time, make sure to do other things, like I said, such as forcing yourself to walk more by parking further away from your destination. If you're trying to train to become a better runner or something like that, you might want to slowly start introducing jogging or adding sprints over a few months, walking or running for longer distances twice a day. But honestly, if you're just a normal person, which you're just most likely are if you're watching this video, walking 3 to 5 times a week for 20 to 40 minutes will be a lot better than what most other people are doing. So I definitely recommend that. So let's say you've done this. You've sort of experimented a little bit. You figured out what exercises work for you. You have a decent split. You're doing squats or some sort of squatting movement, upper body. Maybe you have some dumbbells even, and you're doing some dumbbell work. I know it sounds like I'm like all over the place here, but really it's just trying to find a program that works for you. But let's say you have finished the very first 2 weeks. So you can now start to make it a bit more challenging, but once again, at a slow pace. Try to hit the repetition requirement. So if the program you're following says 10 reps of push-ups, but you can only do 5, try doing 5 that you could do, and then take a short rest, and then try to crank out the rest of them before moving on to the next exercise. This period is where you're just trying to make things a little bit more difficult for sure, but you're still kind of working on it. You don't want to overexert yourself just yet. Push yourself, but don't kill yourself, basically. If you're a bit tired and your muscles are burning, push through the best you can. You're still new, so there's no reason to go super hard or risk anything. If you're feeling true sharp pain, it may be time to stop and evaluate. Either try a new movement, or just kind of cut that movement out for a while. I definitely don't recommend taking extended periods of time off, especially if you don't have to, and I'll also talk a little bit more about that later. But for example, if you're having knee pain, maybe just don't squat, but don't skip push-ups, don't skip crunches, don't skip your other body work just because your leg hurts a little bit. So I think that's extremely important as well. Really try to get good form here. Do this for another week or 2. This is priming you for workload or being able to handle working out for an extended period of time, even if you're fatigued. At this point, you should be doing around 20 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week, and then also walking on top of that, or just doing what I said and kind of parking further away so you get more steps in. Steps are important. You'll burn more calories that way. It'll make life a little bit easier. Try to stick to this plan the best you can. If you can also, I recommend doing it around the same time every day. It's not a requirement, and sometimes life can get in the way. But the reason it's good to do this is because if you do it at the same time every day, it sort of builds a habit or a routine in your mind. So when that day and time comes around, your body's thinking, oh, it's time to work out now. During the summer, I only worked on weekends and worked out on weekdays. So I worked out from 12 to 2 o'clock. So every day when that time would come around, I wasn't thinking, oh crap, I gotta work out. I and my body were already primed for the workouts at that time because I did that every single day. It was a routine. It was something I always did. Once again, not a requirement, though working out around the same time every day will help you in the long run if you can do it. Once that phase is over, it's kind of just time for experimentation, slowly trying to make it harder and more challenging on yourself. This can mean adding more repetitions to an exercise, a few more sets, don't go overboard. If you're doing 8+ sets, it's kind of overkill, or adding an extra day, capping at about 5 or 6. I don't recommend working out every single day. Maybe you smash certain days together. So instead of doing like core and upper body on 2 separate days, you do them together and then you add an extra day, whatever it may be, having longer sessions even. This is what you should be doing up to the 6 to 9 month mark. Remember, slow and steady wins. Sure, you can try to rush it and you'll make progress a little bit quicker, but you're far more likely to burn yourself out. 6 months of rushed progress is not going to be as good as years of steady progress. So make sure that you're making your workouts harder, but you also don't overexert yourself either. You don't want to burn yourself out early. You want to make sure that this is something sustainable that you can do for a long period of time. I know what I said is extremely vague, but I'm so serious when I say this is really just time to experiment. Just your time to see what works. You haven't built an actual program yet. You're still just kind of figuring things out and figuring out what you like to do. If you really like it, keep it in your program and try to do it for as long as you can. If you don't like it, switch it out for something that you think you would like to have in your program for long periods of time. After you've done all of this, you should have built a solid base. Trust the process. Trust it. Sure, you might not see it initially, but within a few months, you'll probably notice that you have more muscle, and the muscle that you do have actually pokes through your skin a little bit. You'll probably look noticeably leaner, even if you didn't actually lose any weight. That is something a lot of people overlook. I'll talk more about it in my diet section, but skinny fat, as some people call it, is often not the result of excess fat alone, but is the result of lack of muscle as well. So your appendages are skinny, but you got a pot belly on you too. Like I stated, I'll touch more on those down the line. Now, where was I? Oh yeah. You will have more muscle on your body. Your body will be used to doing a lot more work. Your tendons will be stronger. Your workload capacity will be a lot better. So it just makes that sort of transition into the gym significantly easier. So now I guess it's time to kind of talk about that. You have been working out for 6 to 9 months at this point. Sure, it's not like full-blown working out, but you've probably built a decent foundation. You kind of know what you're doing at this point. Hopefully you've been watching videos or reading articles apart from this one as well. Sort of, I don't know, figuring things out for yourself, finding out what works for you. Now it's time to actually get that gym membership and get in there. So let's go. Alright, whether you skipped here or you watched through, now it's time for you to actually get into the gym. Whether this is a commercial gym, your own home gym with a good setup, or a friend's. Most people's instincts when going to a commercial gym is to go straight to the treadmills. This is not necessarily a bad idea, and there is a time and place for it, but I don't think it's the best idea either. I'll go more into that a little bit later. Once again, I recommend that you go with a friend who has worked out before and shadow them. They'll be able to get you through a workout and you'll kind of see how the structure is. Though I'm going to continue as if this is not the case, or that the friend that you wish to work out with is just as clueless as you are. It may be kind of scary, but don't worry. Those freakouts that you see in gyms online from the meatheads are mostly fake, out of context, and if they are legitimate, they're extremely rare. Generally, those dudes are actually the most genuine. Think about it. Those guys started where you were, and they had to grind to where they are now over years. It didn't just happen overnight. So the big dudes are actually typically the best people to talk to if you need a little bit of help, and they'll probably be willing to help you. But just use common sense. Hopefully there's a little bit of that left over. Don't talk to them while they're in the middle of a set, right as they're about to start a set, or as they're just talking to others. I mean, common courtesy. Back to the beginning. You have two options. You could wing it, or come with a plan. I do recommend that you come with a plan of some kind, no matter how amateur it is. Looking for a program online, or I'll also link some of my own that I used to use, or still use today, that you could follow to kind of get started. This plan will morph and change over time. Don't feel like you have to get it right on the first try. If you feel unsure about whether or not you want to jump into it, you can always take the observer method. I read this on a forum once, and I don't think it's a terrible idea if you're still feeling a bit nervous about hopping onto a machine or jumping into the rack. So this is where we go back to the whole treadmills thing. This is what you do. If you're not sure, and you're a little bit nervous, you don't know what to do, you head over to one of the million cardio machines that they have. Those are a trap, by the way, for the most part. And you hop on one at a slow pace. You're not trying to burn any real calories. You're not actually working out yet. You're simply walking on the treadmill at a slow pace. Though, what you're doing during this time is you're observing the gym. Don't be weird by staring at people, but just kind of look around and see what's happening. This could be your day one if you wish, or it can just be a couple minutes while you build up the courage to go into the weight section. You'll just kind of observe the area. This method isn't necessary, but it can help you feel a little bit more at ease, giving you a bit of extra time to prepare while in the building, or allowing you to take mental notes of what people are doing. When you're ready, head over there and work with light weights. This means different things to different people. A 210-pound guy is going to have a completely different starting point, most likely, than a 5-foot, 120-pound woman. I mean, maybe not, but generally the starting point is going to be different. I recommend kind of playing with it, but starting with the lower than you think you're going to need. So if you're starting on any exercise with a barbell, start with just the bar. You may pick up the bar and be like, this is way too light, and you can kind of work up from there. No matter the case, when you start, it's similar to what I was going over in the first chapter. For the first few days, you really just want to experiment and learn the movement patterns. If you have to, watch a video on your phone and learn how to do it. Just don't hog up a station too long. I'll talk about etiquette in a later chapter. But after you learn the movements, it's important to start the process of progressive overload. When you start out, honestly, you're going to be hitting personal records pretty much every week. Let's take the bench press, for example. You start with the bar. After a week, you get to the point where the bar just doesn't feel heavy anymore. Or maybe it just never really did. That's besides the point. It's time to start learning progressive overload and increasing the weight. When starting out with a new movement, it's best that you progress no more than 20 pounds at a time. Though I'd say 10 is even better, adding a 5 to each side. When should you add more weight? Well, this is kind of up to you, but since you're new, I recommend doing it this way. Work with whatever weight you have, say the bar, and once you can do, 8 reps, 8 repetitions, add a 5 to each side and increase the weight to 55 pounds. This may bring you down to 5 to 6 reps. It may be like you did absolutely nothing and it feels the exact same. If this was too heavy to do 8 reps, stick with this weight and work towards that 8 rep mark. If it wasn't, you keep incrementing up until you can only do about 6 to 7 reps. Then work with that weight. When you become more experienced, you can experiment with other rep ranges. As a strength athlete, I do a lot of doubles and triples, 2 to 3 reps, but I don't recommend that you do this if you're just starting out. Keep doing this method as long as you can, or as long as you feel comfortable. Make sure those 8 reps are as clean as possible. I shouldn't have to say this, but your ass shouldn't be 2 feet off the bench because you're straining so hard to get the weight off your chest. Just a PSA, now back to what I was saying. When should you stop? Well, this is going to sound dumb, hell, but I mean it. Whenever you feel like you understand the lift enough to add other components, such as a pause, half rep, wide or narrow grip, lower higher rep ranges, etc. If you're confused about what these do, it's too early for you. Don't worry about it. Stick to the plan. You'll know when you know, trust me. It's not one of those things where it's like you got to search for it. You'll just kind of know when you know it, if that makes any sense. I know I've been saying you should experiment with your training, and that's somewhat true, though at the same time, you have to give an exercise a certain fair shot. If you're trying a movement such as, barbell rows, it would be unfair to try it 2 to 3 times, see no real change, and then throw it out because it didn't work, in quotes. Give an exercise a bit of time. Give yourself some time to really become familiar with the movement. 4 to 8 weeks, I would say, is a good gauge. If you're seeing improvements in weight lifted, reps performed, or visual structural changes and it feels good, keep it in the program for another couple weeks. If it doesn't after an extended period of time, you could always try to modify it, such as a one-arm row if you're doing rows, or you could substitute it for another back exercise like pull-ups, lat pull-downs, one-arm cable rows, etc. After, let's say, 6 months, I think it's time to start introducing deload weeks. To be honest, when you first start out in that 0 to 6 month span, you'll probably not be strong enough to stress your central nervous system enough to require one right away. That's not a dig on you, but it's true. You're just not strong enough and haven't been doing enough work that your central nervous system really needs that break. But after 6 months, let's say, you're probably strong enough and you've probably been doing enough. That's a good idea to start incorporating this into your program. A deload week is exactly what it sounds like. It's a week in which every 4 to 12 weeks you will deload. Personally, I do every 8, but this is going to require you to pay attention to how your body feels. And certain programs might require different amounts of time. Most bodybuilders are more like 8 to 12 weeks, whereas a lot of athletes are more like 4 to 8. Really just depends on you. There are 3 ways you could do this. I mean, there's probably more, but there's 3 main ways you could do this, and it's pretty much up to personal preference. There are advantages to all 3, but the difference it makes heavily depends on your goals, how long you've been working out, so experience. But other than that, it's pretty negligible for the most part. First, you could do a standard deload. This means going into the gym for the first half of your deload, you cut your repetitions in half, and that's it. Whether you normally do 3x10 or 2x20 on a specific exercise, you'll cut that in half, now doing 3x5 or 2x10, with the exact same weight. That is crucial. Do not up the weight. It is going to feel easier. That is legitimately the point. Don't up the weight. Some people want to for some reason. That's not what you're trying to do. For the second half, you're going to do the exact same thing, but you're going to cut the weight that you do in half as well. This is going to feel so easy, and you're going to be like, I've got to go heavier. I feel like I'm doing nothing. People are looking at me, and I'm like doing 50 pounds. Come on, what is this? Once again, that's the point. It's fine. So if you're doing 150 pounds on overhead press or something like that, and I don't know, for 6 reps, you need to cut the reps in half, so 6 down to 3, and only do 75 pounds. Don't try to do more, okay? The whole point is to give your body a rest while continuing to work this movement pattern. That's the point. You'll do this for the last half of your workout split, and after 5 to 7 days, you'll return to your normal programming. This will give your body, or more so your central nervous system, a well-needed rest, and you'll feel better coming back. You'll likely feel stronger the first time you do it and subsequent times, assuming you did it intelligently and actually worked hard prior to the deload week. The second method is basically the same, but skipping the first half and just going to cutting the reps and weight in half right away. This is valid too. It technically isn't optimal, but you'll still be working that movement pattern. This is completely fine. The last deload week method is one that I personally use. However, with that being said, I do not recommend this for beginners for a couple of reasons. It's more of an intermediate, advanced, elite method. Honestly, elites probably don't really use this method, but if you're just a casual gym goer, this is completely fine, but once again, don't recommend it for beginners. The third method is just taking an entire week off from the gym altogether and giving your body a complete break. This is completely valid, but here's why I don't recommend it for people just starting out. First, you're not training that movement pattern during this time. When you're more advanced, you have more experience and can more accurately adjust your training and form when you come back. I mean, this is still a downside for experienced lifters, but more so for those who are just starting out and don't have like a really good idea of what the movement is, right? Someone who's been bench pressing for, 10 years kind of understands how it feels and will be able to come back pretty easily. They probably take a whole month off, come back to bench pressing. It might feel weird, but they'll be able to do it because they've been doing it for so long. But someone who just started out doesn't really have that, they're not super familiar with that lift yet, or at least not as much as some other people, so it's probably not the best idea that they do this. But the bigger reason is, well, personally, I know that I'm going to come back. Hell, by day 3 or 4, I want to come back, but I don't because I don't want to risk injuring myself. I've been doing this whole workout thing for many years. Even before I started actually lifting weights, I was still doing push-ups, doing sit-ups, doing pull-ups, doing all that stuff. It's been a part of my life, a routine at this point for a very long time. However, for those who pretty much have to force themselves into the gym, they are much more likely to make excuses for not coming back. They'll be more likely to fall into old habits. So for the first 2 deload weeks at least, I recommend doing method 1 or 2. 3 is for those who train really hard and have been doing it for a while and know that they can stay consistent and will actually come back. Just thought I'd put that out there. And then I'm also going to throw this out there before we even move on to the last little bit. Deload weeks don't have to be the whole body if you don't want them to be. I recommend that you do a whole body deload week at a specific time in your programming every single time. So every 4, 6, 8, 10, 9, 11, whatever. Doesn't matter how many ever weeks you want it to be. Though if you are feeling fatigue, like immense fatigue, where your weight, your reps, and all that stuff is starting to break down in a specific muscle group. So let's say, my back. My back, I can't move up in weight. I can't do more reps. In fact, they're going down. And it's been 4 weeks, but my deload week isn't for another 4 weeks at the 8-week mark. You can deload a specific muscle group. That is completely okay to do. And it's actually encouraged if you're feeling that way. So if your back or your biceps or whatever are getting to the point where they're so fatigued that you cannot progress and you're actually regressing, it may be a good idea to deload specifically an exercise or specifically a muscle group just for a week and then come back to doing it full force afterwards. That is an option. However, I still recommend that you do take a full week of deloading for every single muscle group every once in a while, so you stay healthy. Another important point is that when you've been training for a while, there's something that's bound to happen at some point. These are the dreaded plateaus. I do not care who you are, this is bound to happen to you. It happened to me far too many times. Every single person who's ever lifted weights has gone through it. I mean, right now, both my bench press and deadlift have plateaued, and getting out of it can feel like an impossible chore or banging your head against the wall. What do you do about it? Well, there's many options. First, it may be as simple as taking a deload week from a muscle group, or maybe just a deload week in general. Though sometimes it may be way more stubborn than that. What has worked for me is taking short breaks from lifts and subbing them back in later. When I've been having issues with my back squat, for example, I couldn't go above, I believe it was 365. So what I did is I subbed it out for front squats and zerchers. One time I also did it with reverse lunges. It's really up to you. But anyway, eventually when I came back a few weeks later and added back squats back into my program, I shot past 365 within 2 weeks. So, you got to kind of build back up to it. So start like 345, 355, and then I went past it, and I believe I got up to about 395 before I plateaued again. I did the same thing on bench press, though I have a harder time with bench press personally. But what I did was do purely incline for a little while. One time I went to dumbbell bench instead. There's many ways you can go about it. Typically, you just could try subbing out an exercise with another similar exercise for 4 to 8 weeks and then go back. That usually does it for me, but sometimes that doesn't. So what you might have to do is change the rep range. Do 6 to 8 reps. Do 10 to 12. Do 3 to 5. Whatever it is that you are doing right now. So if you're doing 6 to 8, try 3 to 5. Or if you're doing 10 to 12, try 6 to 8. Or whatever sort of combination you want to do. Just try something different. Go heavier, go lighter, do pause reps, try to push up the weight a little bit faster. Try pin variations, a pin squat, pin press, whatever it might be. There's a lot of different options here. But it's basically just kind of changing something a little bit, getting a new form of stimulus, and then trying to come back. That will typically do it. It's going to take a lot of willpower. They absolutely suck, but just remember that you can break through them. You just kind of have to be smart about it, which can also be difficult sometimes. Now that you understand the basics, the rest is kind of up to you. You could continue on a more traditional fitness split, or you could explore other avenues. When you feel comfortable, you can experiment with more things like strength training, heavy weights, high intensity work. You could try working on endurance. It's your journey. It's up to you. It sounds scary how I'm wording it. It sounds like it's some unmarked path, some jungle that's never been explored. You have no idea where you're heading. And actually that's true. But if you just follow a good plan and stick to it for a while, eventually you'll feel comfortable enough to try new stuff. You will feel completely in control and you'll almost be excited to try something new. So stick with a plan, and then eventually you'll know when the time comes that you want to try something new, you can try something new. Hopefully you're watching other videos, you're reading articles or whatever. It doesn't have to be like your entire undivided focus on fitness, but hopefully you're consuming some other content as well that will kind of help you in your fitness journey. That's pretty much all I have for the gym. It's pretty bare bones. There's not much really to go over. We'll go more in depth in other chapters, more of the nitty-gritty stuff. You come to the gym with a plan, you work out, you learn about deload weeks, and you experiment. That's pretty much all fitness is. And eventually you'll find a plan that you like, you'll stick with it for a while, making small alterations here and there. That's all. With that being said, let's move on to chapter 3. It's going to be a pretty short chapter. We're just going to talk about gym etiquette. I mean, most of it's pretty straightforward, and honestly, you can probably skip it, but I might as well bring it up, so here we go. This next section is going to be pretty short, but I feel that I should probably include it just for the sake of completion. Most of this is going to be common knowledge to the majority of people, as most of it's just kind of common sense, but maybe not to everybody. I'm going to do this in a list style and go over 10 or so of the big gym etiquette rules, so listen up. You ready? Alright, let's get into it. First, re-rack your weights when you're done with them. Don't leave any plates on the bar or dumbbells on the ground. This should go without saying, but it seems that this isn't common knowledge. To some people, it is one thing if you plan to use them within a reasonable time frame, maybe within 2 or 3 minutes. That's understandable. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you're done with your workout or you're done with that certain weight, put everything back. This also means putting them back in the right spot. Don't put the 80s where the 10s go. Don't put the 20s where the 75s go. And don't put the 5-pound plates where the 45-pound plates go. Like, just use common sense, dude. Put them back in the right spot. Unless the rack is just in complete disarray. That'll happen from time to time. You know, okay, maybe that's sort of an exception. But even then, try to put them close to the regular spot. And if they are organized, put them back where you got them. Okay? I think that goes without saying, but to some people, that's just, it's a mystery. I don't know why. 2, make sure not to bother anybody during or right before they start their set, and maybe give them a little bit of time after their set. The first one is obvious. If they're performing whatever exercise, they'll be far too busy to be able to talk and have a good conversation with you. Don't interrupt them. The second one can be harder to judge. Some people have rituals right before they start. Some go right into it. Some get pumped up. Some may seem like they're just sitting there, but in reality, they have a song and they're just waiting for the beat to drop, something like that. Though, if they seem like they're not doing anything, or they just straight up aren't, like they're scrolling on their phone or something, that is probably the best time to approach them if you need to do so for any reason. There's a million reasons why you might want to ask for advice. You might want to ask if they're done with a weight, a spot, whatever it might be. Just be courteous. 3, be willing to work in with people or have people work in with you. This is especially important when you're at a busy gym. Personally, I very rarely attend commercial gyms, but I often work out at my school gym during the fall time. That gym is very small, and if it's busy, sometimes it's going to require that you share a rack or bench or weight, whatever it might be. Sometimes someone might ask to work in with you, or you might have to work in with them, especially if it's busy and there's just nothing open. To work in basically just means to share. While you rest your next set, they'll hit their set, and when they're finished, you can then hop in right after them or however much time you need. Don't be rude, and if someone asks to work in, let them. I mean, unless there's a legit reason to not let them work in. But I'm going to leave that up to your discretion personally because I can't think of a reason, but there might be one. 4, clean equipment. Clean your equipment, especially if you're a sweaty person. Make sure to wipe down your benches and other equipment when you're finished using it. 5, if you're recording a set for whatever reason, be non-intrusive and don't get mad if someone walks in front of your camera. I know most people have the sentiment of no filming whatsoever. I disagree with the sentiment wholeheartedly, as there are legitimate reasons to record a set. I know most people just kind of go in, throw on some weight, do a couple bench presses and whatever flies, and then just leave the gym. But there are legit reasons you might want to record a set, whether that's for a memory, to see depth, to check form, to record a PR. But the thing is just don't be an asshole. Somebody walks in front of your camera, don't bark at them. I've seen that on video. It's weird. It's simple as that. Just be understanding that if it's a public gym, you know, people might walk in the way. 6, don't hog up multiple machines. Unless the gym is dead as hell. Even then, don't actually hug them. Let other people use them when you're not currently using them. Be willing to let others work in. And worst case scenario, do another exercise that targets the muscle that you were hoping to target. This is only really an issue if you're a superset enjoyer, but I mean, some people want to hog up like 2 or 3 machines at once, and it's like, you can't really do that, okay? You could have like one machine to yourself, I guess, but even then be willing to let people work in. You know, understand that other people might use the machine, they're not going to know it's yours. Just basically don't be a dick. That's what I'm saying. I don't even know why I dragged it out this long, I'm sorry. Just don't be that guy. 7, don't leave the machine for too long. You always hear about that guy who leaves his water bottle on the bench to reserve it and then leaves for like 20 minutes. If you need to use the bathroom real quick, that's one thing, but don't leave a machine or a rack or whatever it might be unoccupied for an extended period of time if you plan on still using it. 8, be willing to share weights if you're not using them, but also don't steal weights without asking. Should go without saying, but you'd be surprised about some of the individuals who don't heed this advice. It's pretty straightforward. If someone wants to use a 45 and you have no plan on using it, then let them use it. If you do, tell them that you'll be using it soon. And don't steal other people's equipment without asking if they're done with it. Or you can, work in with them if need be, but don't just steal it. You can also ask if they're done with it and then take it depending on their answer. Pretty straightforward as well. 9, Adhere to the dress code. Some of you really did not get this memo. My God. 10. Just be a decent human being. Okay, I think you get it. I could go on about etiquette, but most of it's pretty simple and straightforward and can apply to really anywhere. Let's get off this 2015 top 10 list and onto the diet section. Diet is one of the toughest things for people to understand, it would seem. Some can't wrap their minds around it, and a bad diet is often the reason the majority of those who fail in the first place. Whether it be weight loss, weight gain, maintenance, building muscle, getting tone, if you will. I'm going to do my best to split this diet section into mini sections. The first mini section is going to be general information about food and supplements. The second section is going to be for those who wish to lose weight, third for those who wish to gain weight, and the fourth section for those kind of in between, aka skinny fat people. Go more in depth on that later. Then I will bring it all back. Let's start with general diet information. Oh yeah, before I even start with that, most of what I am going to say applies to the average person, the majority of you. But everyone is different. If your doctor has given you other advice due to a disease, ailment, or you are deficient in a certain macronutrient, whatever it might be, follow their advice and not mine, some random dude on the internet. It is true that everyone's different, but what I am saying will apply to the vast majority of you, assuming you are just a healthy individual. Now that I got the obligatory warning out of the way, we can actually start. First, regardless of who you are, you'll find much success with building muscle and being healthier in general if you prioritize protein. You may have heard this before. Basically, just making sure you get as much protein as possible. Unless you have some form of kidney disease that doesn't allow you to consume a lot of protein, you would be an exception to the rule. I still would recommend that you eat as much protein as you safely can. Protein is extremely important for building muscle and repairing tissue damage. A lot of people do not consume enough protein daily, so prioritizing it and making sure you have protein with almost every meal will make it much easier to hit the amount your body requires. How much protein is that though? Well, you may have heard the whole 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. This is a bit much for most people. Assuming you don't have an aforementioned kidney disease, this will not be anywhere near enough to do any serious damage, but it can still be really costly and really isn't required for the average Joe. It's just a bit too much. There's a point of diminishing returns and you've reached it by the time you got to that point. For most people, the minimum requirement is closer to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight on the lower end, and 1.5 grams to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight on the higher end. Though, you also have the 1 gram per pound of lean mass. That's also an option that you can use. However, most people do not know their lean mass, so this isn't the best option for the majority of people. Also, I'm going to nip this in the bud right now. No, you can in fact absorb more than 30 grams of protein per meal. It's better to spread it out throughout the day, making sure you get all your protein in different meals. But you'll be able to absorb pretty much all the protein you consume. It's just that eating it all in one go is not really the best way of going about it. You'll find that muscle is easier to build and you'll feel a lot better if you were previously under-consuming protein or not getting as much protein as you truly needed. 2, get your fats in as well. Fat is seen as the enemy. Fat makes you fat. Well, that was more like 1980s. I think most people have come around to it, but still you'll hear some people go, "Oh, fat makes you fat." This is misleading, to say the least. Fat is high in calories. So eating a lot of fatty foods can make it easier to gain weight, but fat on its own is innocent. Saturated fat's a little bit different, but still follow generally the same rules. Fat is important for helping regulate hormones and absorbing certain vitamins. Not consuming enough fat in your diet will make it more difficult for these processes to happen. 20 to 30% or so of your calorie intake should come from fat. So if you consume on average 2,000 calories a day, 400 to 600 calories or 44 to 67 grams should be consumed daily. And I'll kind of break that down later how I got those numbers, but it'll make sense in a little bit. This can fluctuate depending on activity level and personal needs, but in general, make sure you're getting your fats in. They are extremely important as well. They are a pillar of the macronutrients. Next, carbs are not the enemy. Carbs can be quick digesting and easy to eat a lot of, which is why if you're not careful, you'll overconsume stuff like bread, It is important to try and limit carbs to a reasonable level and get an adequate amount of carbs in, but not cut them out altogether. Doing so will make you feel super tired and lethargic much more often, especially if you're an athlete. If you're an athlete, cutting carbs completely is a big no-no. But even if you're just a regular person, I wouldn't recommend cutting carbs out altogether. Technically, most carbohydrates are not like fats or protein where you have a certain amount you need to consume a day. You can get along for quite a while without really any real carbohydrates. But this is not a good idea. So limit them, don't cut them out of your diet completely. Fiber, it's good for the gut. I mean, there's a lot of other little things as well, but that's the biggest one. Get your fiber in. That's it. Water and sodium. Water is straightforward. Drink your water, it's very important. But salt is also important. Some people forget that sodium is an electrolyte, helping you with hydration, which is why sports drinks tend to have a lot of sodium in them and generally taste more salty. Hydration is important. Get your damn electrolytes in and your vitamins as well. Especially magnesium. Magnesium is a big one. A lot of people are very deficient in magnesium. Not so much potassium, but I mean, some people might be. But magnesium, sodium, potassium, big three electrolytes, make sure you're not deficient in those. Then you have the big one, creatine. Make sure that, assuming you don't have some form of kidney disease, obviously, or any other disease that wouldn't allow you to consume creatine, that you're getting at least 5 grams a day. Technically, it depends on body weight and other factors. Personally, I take 8 grams a day, but that's just because of my weight and stuff like that. But getting at least 5 grams a day will make sure that you have the minimum amount of creatine your body really needs. People have this misconception about creatine, and I'm not 100% sure why. People think creatine is like some special powder that was made in the lab that gets you big and you need to cycle it like steroids. I've heard people ask if they need to cycle creatine. No. Creatine is an amino acid that is naturally occurring in foods. It's nothing super special. It's just that to get creatine from food is really difficult. It's not like most other vitamins and minerals. Red meat, such as steak, has the most creatine. It's the most creatine-dense food. However, 16 ounces of steak only has around 2 grams of creatine in it, which means unless you want to eat 2.5 pounds, 1.13 kilograms of steak every day, or even more if you decide to consume stuff like turkey, fish, and eggs, then your best bet is to just supplement it like most people do. It'll make you feel better, it'll bring water into the muscles to make you fuller, and you'll have far more energy when performing physically demanding tasks. You'll output a lot more force as well. So, no, creatine is not some special powder from an outer space land. It's an amino acid. It's just that most people realistically are not going to get enough of it from food. So, you should definitely supplement it. Creatine monohydrate is the best. Lastly, before I get to the weight loss and weight gain stuff, I want to bring up a fun fact for you guys. Some people may not know, but protein, carbs, alcohol, fat, and fiber all have a rather consistent calorie profile. So there is some variation, but in general, this information I'm about to provide will make things make a lot more sense. 1 gram of carb has 4 calories, while fiber, a complex carb, has 2 calories per gram. Protein has 4 calories per gram, alcohol has 7 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram. This is why people who eat a lot of fatty foods or drinks and an absorbent amount of alcohol have harder times losing weight. In addition, carbs digest super easily, fat is next, and protein is the hardest for your body to digest. This is why eating stuff like bread feels like you'll never be full, but you'll feel full much quicker off of foods with a little bit more fat, and especially protein. It's why you can eat what feels like pounds of bread at a restaurant, but might struggle with a 16 to 18 ounce steak, whatever it might be. But that's just a general guide. Most of the time, this isn't going to be very beneficial to you, but it's nice to understand where your calories are coming from. Now that most of the general information is out of the way, let's talk about losing weight. People seem to think it's a complex equation that only the elite understand, but in reality, it's pretty simple. It's not easy per se, but it's pretty simple. This is what I read on a forum once, and I thought I would recite it since it was a pretty solid passage. I don't remember it word for word, but this is pretty much how it went. Let's say you have a dog, and it's starting to get a little chubby, fluffy, chunky, whatever word you want to use, fat. What do? Well, You probably lower the portion size of the meals you give to him or her, or you take him or her on more walks throughout the day. Give them a little bit more exercise. Though, why is it when you try to lose weight, it's all of a sudden an impossible task? I can answer that for you, because it's not. It's the same process. Maybe not with eating dog kibble and going on walks with a leash, unless you're into that, but the general portion control and exercise part. Reducing the amount of calories you consume in a single day. Kaiko, calories in, calories out. There are technically some sort of weird exceptions. They're not really exceptions, but there's some things that will make this process harder. But for the vast majority of people, it's as simple as that. Reducing said calories will allow you to lose this weight. This is the most straightforward diet to follow. Just lowering your calories. Stuff like keto, carnivore, paleo, vegetarian mostly work because it makes staying in a calorie deficit a lot easier. It's really hard to reach your maintenance calories in a single day if you're eating just meat and such, or just vegetables. You're pretty much always going to stay under your maintenance calories in a calorie deficit. But wait, let me back this up. Maintenance calories, Kaiko, calorie deficit? What does all this mean? Well, some of you probably already know what it means, and it's pretty straightforward, but some of you have maybe never heard this term before. So let me explain. The average person requires 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day, but this is heavily dependent on activity level, build, weight, and some genetic variation. Some people like to push this a little bit more, but it's kind of true, there is some genetic variation. For example, my maintenance is actually much higher than the average person's, at about 3,100 outside of sports season and climbs up to 3,600 during sports season due to the extra exercise that I'm getting in. However, my mom only needs about 1,900 calories to maintain weight. Maintenance just means to maintain, to not lose nor gain weight. True maintenance is pretty much impossible, as there's no real way to account for variation throughout the week, month, or year, but you can still have a general idea and stay around your maintenance level. You can find your maintenance through experimentation and weighing your food, or you can get a rough estimate using an online calculator and going from there. Let's say you found out your maintenance calories. You're just going to want to take this number, if you're losing weight, and subtract between 200 and 500 or so, and follow the number that you get. Some calculators may also provide numbers based on how much weight you want to lose per week. I'd say 0.5 to 1 pound, or 0.45 kilograms per week for the vast majority of people, though you can probably get up to 2 pounds a week if you can handle it. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend going as slow as possible, as when people try to crash diet, it ends up going horribly for most. Lowering the calories by 1,000 or more is just redundant unless you need to lose 100 pounds really fast, or you'll die or something insane like that. Otherwise, losing weight slowly through lowering your calories will make your life a whole lot better when you do lose weight. What's important isn't how fast you lose the weight, but that it comes off and that you can keep it off for the rest of your life or as long as you need to. This isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. Sorry for the corny line, but it's true, and some people seem to miss that fact. I also recommend going on walks for about 30-ish minutes a day, like I discussed in the training section of the video. This will make it easier for you to hit your calorie goals. I do not recommend doing just an insane amount of cardio in order to try to burn more calories, as this is likely to just tire you out, make it mentally more demanding, and tear up your joints. Plus, you got to do way more cardio than you think you're going to need to do. Just do a bit of extra cardio and lift your weights, and then be in a calorie deficit. That's also important too, is lifting weights. If you didn't know, muscle is very expensive for your body to keep. Very taxing. This may sound like a bad thing, but what this translates to is you get to eat more. Having more muscle and being more active too will allow you to burn more calories at your BMR, base metabolic rate, basically when you're just living. Oh, back on track. Do your cardio, lift your weights, and eat in a 200 to 500 calorie deficit, or whatever you need personally. Maybe even a 100 calorie deficit, though there's a lot of variation. Like I said, in 100 calories, you might accidentally tip over the wrong way. So 200 to 500 is a little safer. This is easier said than done. I understand that. If you want to make it as easy as possible, I definitely recommend eating as clean as possible. A lot of junk food is extremely high in calories and will likely have you craving more. Not to say you can't have some in moderation. I still love junk food, but to be wary of what you're consuming. You can also try substituting high-calorie foods for lower-calorie options. Fat-free stuff is pretty overrated for health in my opinion, but it does lower the amount of calories in said item, so it can be a game changer if you want to substitute whatever you use normally. Also, avoiding super fatty foods. Replace soda with diet soda. I know it's a controversial opinion, but realize unless you're just consuming a insane quantity of diet soda, it's not really going to be harmful to you. I don't recommend drinking 6 to 10 cans a day, but if you have a can every once in a while, it's not that bad. It's a good near 0-calorie alternative if you're having the craving, and assuming that you can stomach the taste of diet soda. Personally, I don't mind it, but I know a lot of people do, so you're gonna have to try to figure out that for yourself. Not saying you can't drink normal soda if you want one, just understand that calories are like money. Would you spend $400 of your $3,000 on junk you don't really need? Maybe. Well, make that choice and understand that you can't really easily get that money back. So is that $400 worth it? Or I guess in this case, soda is typically 90 to 160 calories per can and a lot of sugar. Is it worth it? Yeah, then drink it. Go for it. If you treat calories like money, you're much more likely to make smarter choices. Though don't be obsessive over it. I know, don't be obsessive, don't be sad, don't be I get it, what I just said. But just have an idea of what you're consuming. Now, before we kind of switch gears here, I want to say something that's really important. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. That 200 to 500 calorie deficit we were talking about changes over time. What I mean is, a lot of people get stuck, and here's why. Sometimes people get stuck on the weight on the scale itself. Your weight's going to fluctuate due to water, glycogen, and other stuff in your gut. Your weight can be, 220 in the morning, 227 in the evening, 225 right before bed, and then 220 in the morning again. Your weight fluctuates. You have to judge your averages, not the number itself. Though, a lot of people might find that they are staying around the same weight for weeks on end, for a real extended period of time. Not a day or two, but more like a few weeks. So it's like, okay, they're truly not losing weight anymore. This could be because your calorie deficit has caught up to you. You may have been losing weight just fine, but after a while, you're going to hit a plateau, assuming you don't adjust your numbers. Maybe you're 250 pounds, okay? You're going to burn X calories. Then let's say you eat X calories minus 300. So you're in a calorie deficit. You lose some weight for a bit. While I said building muscle will burn more calories, assuming you're watching this because you're overweight or obese, you're not going to build it quick enough to come anywhere near offsetting this. So, okay, now you're around 235. You lost 15 pounds. What was originally a 300 calorie deficit might now just be your maintenance. As you lose mass, the amount of calories your body needs to maintain that weight goes down as well. So now you're going to need to take that new maintenance you have and drop the calories from that. It sucks, I know, but it's all part of the process. Now for those on the other side of the coin, too skinny. I was once there as well, believe it or not, so I completely understand. When it comes to gaining weight, it's damn near the same exact process, just on the other side of the spectrum. We talked about the caloric deficit, now we switch into the caloric surplus. Gaining muscle in a deficit is hard, and gaining size without a surplus of some kind is pretty much impossible. In case you skipped to this part and didn't watch the last section, basically we have something called maintenance calories, your maintenance. This is the amount of calories required for you to maintain your weight. Slight fluctuation will happen due to water weight, what's in your gut, glycogen, etc., but one should stay around the same weight on average, assuming they are actually consuming in a range of their maintenance. You can find your maintenance through experimentation alone, but I recommend using an online calculator, following what it says to do, and then taking that number it gives you. And since you're trying to gain weight, you want to be in a surplus, adding 200 to 500 on top of it. When it comes to caloric surpluses, it's a little bit more risky than calorie deficits. Not as in, oh crap, I might die. But you have to be a little more cautious about not putting on too much undesirable weight. Now, I know if you're watching this, most likely you're having trouble putting on weight. So probably not as big of an issue to you, but it is something you should watch out for. The higher your caloric surplus on average, the more weight and more fat you're going to put on. I don't say this to scare you. If you're watching this as someone who's truly skinny and you're starting out in the gym, You'll be able to put on a surprising amount of weight, both fat and muscle, and still look pretty good. When you're skinny, you're not really all that filled out. Then once you actually put on some muscle and a good chunk of fat, you'll begin to truly fill out, likely looking and feeling better. Just make sure you do your cardio, not too much. You're trying to stay healthy, not lose weight. Lift your weights so you can actually put on some muscle and pick up that damn fork. Start eating. You gotta eat a surplus though. That's the hard part. Like losing weight, realize that your surplus can catch up to you as well. If you're, say, 110 pounds, you take your maintenance at 300 to begin with, you'll start to gain weight. Once you reach a certain point, let's say, 130 pounds, what used to be your surplus will now be your maintenance. When you are increasing the amount of calories you eat, you're basically just chasing your new maintenance. So you add 300 on top of that, well, eventually that extra 300 just goes into your maintenance calories anyway. I kind of explained that weird, but I think you got it. You're smart enough. I talked about the mechanics of it, but I know it's hard for some people. Some people are hard gainers, which, okay, I'm going to say right now, I don't think is very true. A lot of people think they eat a lot of food, but in reality, the food that they're eating isn't very calorically dense. So they eat large quantities of it, but since the calories aren't there, they don't actually gain weight. Or maybe they do eat a lot of food, but only a few days of the week, then eat less on other days. Remember, it's not about the amount of calories you eat in a single day, but rather over time. So if you eat a 2,000 calorie surplus one day, but in a 350 to 400 calorie deficit the other days, it's pretty much going to even out. Very few people truly have a metabolism too fast to realistically catch up with, or they're just extremely active. That's also a possibility, but then you would probably know why you're not gaining weight if you were that person. The average person who's just lives a damn near sedentary lifestyle or doesn't do anything extreme is probably just eating less than they think they are, or they're eating less calorie dense foods than they think they are. When you're trying to gain weight, it's okay not to eat 100% clean. Unless you're a pro-level bodybuilder or you have to adhere to some strict diet for whatever reason, there isn't a point in trying to gain weight 100% clean. It's almost impossible mentally and damn near physically. I would say if you're trying to gain a bit of weight, eat 80% clean. So this is all the good foods, and then like 20% dirty. But if you're super underweight, you could probably cheat a little bit more and eat a little bit more dirty food than that. What do I mean by dirty? Fatty foods like burgers, pizza, bacon, stuff with a lot of cheese, bread, all within reason. But when you're not eating healthy being stuff like your chicken breasts, your ground beef, turkey, bison, steak, tofu, whatever, I don't know, don't be afraid to get a little bit dirty. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all the traditionally considered unhealthy foods. You can have stuff like peanuts, that's really good. Peanut butter, just stuff like that. Eating a bit of junk food in order to hit your calories, not necessarily a bad thing, just do it within reason. You can also try substituting. I was talking about peanut butters and peanuts. Well, if you like apples, eat them with peanut butter. Eat peanuts, cashews, and almonds. If you're cooking steak or whatever, use more butter and more oil. And don't tell anybody I told you this, but if you're making a protein shake with your mass gainer supplement or whey or whatever you're using, if you just, don't buy into that stuff. Not that it's bad. I actually use that stuff myself, not the mass gainer, but the whey. Whatever. I think you get what I mean. Anyway, your protein shake. Add a little bit of olive oil to it. Not too much, but you'll be shocked by how many calories are in olive oil and how small the portion sizes really are. Now, I just told you to do a bunch of unhealthy stuff. But with that being said, don't go overboard. Just fill in the calories that you can't get from eating clean with a bit of junk food, or at least foods high in calories. Peanuts, peanut butter, cashews, avocado. That's really it for the twigs of the world. You just have to eat more. But not just more food, rather more calories. You got it. I think you got it. Let's get into the last section for those who are truly cursed. Skinny fat people. This is a group of people who usually feel they're at a crossroads of sorts. Do I cut and lose weight? Do I bulk and gain weight? I'm already fat, but I'm also too skinny. I wear a medium, but I got this big old gut on me. Kind of a weird situation to be in. Skinny fat, as it's often called, describes someone who has thin arms and legs, but a big belly and possibly man tits, though those aren't required. When you see pictures of someone who's skinny fat, they usually just have no chest development at all, but they got big old love handles. These people are in an interesting predicament, but it's far more of a simple fix than you would probably think. Skinny fat is the result of having too much excess fat. I know, shocker. But the main thing is too little muscle on the frame. This results in you having small arms but a belly. That probably means you have not done too much lifting or serious exercise before, or you haven't in a long period of time. Putting on some muscle will push through the fat quite a bit and can make you go from skinny fat to quite fit looking. There are guys who are 20% body fat that look pretty dang good just because they have enough muscle on their frame to look filled out, whereas somebody who's 20% body fat just looks skinny but has big love handles and a gut. I probably put pictures on screen to kind of illustrate my point. If I didn't, sorry. So the simple answer is follow a well-structured exercise program and get to building some muscle. There's a lot of debate on how to approach this from the diet perspective. Some say bulk, some say cut. What is the right answer? Well, both have their benefits, but if I were to give my personal opinion, I'm going to say something super controversial. I would say main gain. It'd probably be the best option for these individuals. Is main gaining the best option for everybody? No. Is it the most optimal? No. But it's simple and will work most of the time with some time and dedication. Main gaining is basically a lean bulk. It got the name I forget where exactly it came from. It's pretty much just a lean bulk, which is eating slightly above maintenance, 100 to 200, while resistance training on top of it. This is going to make sure that you don't put on really any unnecessary fat. You might put on a tiny bit, but not really. And while you get into the gym or go to the park or whatever, you build some muscle. That's pretty much it. Once you get out of the skinny fat realm, that's when you can experiment with bulking and cutting if that's what you wish to do. Not a requirement, but it's an option for those who it works for. But honestly, main gaining does work, and it can be a strategy if you just care about health and you want to put on some muscle. It's not a bad thing. Bulking and cutting will just be a little more optimal for getting every little bit out of building muscle, I guess is how you could say it. That's really it for losing, gaining, maintaining, or main gaining weight. I could go more into depth about what exactly to eat on a diet. However, that isn't for me to decide. You have your staples such as chicken and rice, steak and noodles, but just like everything, there is no always or nevers. I can't tell you when you're allowed to eat junk food, nor am I going to tell you you can never eat junk food. There's a place and time that it's okay to have a little bit of a cheat meal, and then there's other times you shouldn't. You have to make that decision yourself. There's also places online you can find a good meal plan. You just kind of have to search and also experiment yourself. Follow my general advice on calories, fats, protein, carbs, fiber, etc. That's the general outline. How you craft your personal diet is mostly up to you. This section ran far longer than the other section, so let's move on to the second to last section, unless I added one at the end. I don't know. Maybe this didn't age well. Mentality. Very important. This one's going to be one that a lot of people need to hear. Mentality is so important when it comes to getting into fitness for the first time or for the first time in a long time. You may have heard that discipline is more important than motivation. Is this true? Well, yeah, generally it is. But those 6 words are pretty much meaningless if you don't know what it even means. Motivation is what gets you excited to get into the gym. But discipline, accountability, is what actually gets you in there. Discipline holds you accountable. I'm not going to say that resistance training is miserable and now that you've chose to better your life, you'll live a life of pain. That's disingenuous, though it's not entirely untrue either. Maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but you kind of get what I mean. I'm not going to lie to you. See, the problem isn't that fitness is all suffering, but it's that people aren't prepared for what it does entail. You are going to have to try hard. If you're someone who hasn't exercised before, like really worked their ass off, then you're going to be in for a rude awakening. The awakening often chews people up and spits them out. It's part of the reason so many fail. I told you diet is the biggest progress killer. Well, so is a crappy mentality. You're going to be uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you are aware of what to expect, you can attack it a lot better. Motivation comes in waves. It goes up and down, but discipline needs to be there. If you're tired of looking and feeling like crap, or you just want more for yourself, like everything in this world, you'll have to work for it. You'll have to work out when you're happy. You'll have to work out when you're sad, when you're energized, when you're tired, when you're angry, whatever feeling you may have. It's what you have to do. If you're waiting to feel great every single time you go to the gym, you're not going to get much done. I'm not saying that you can never take a day off to yourself and to just completely neglect how you're feeling. But don't skip gym sessions on a regular basis just because you're sad. Don't skip entire sessions just because your back hurts a little bit or you slept the wrong way. Again, not saying you should push through excruciating pain because you think it makes you tougher. I'm just saying that if you can work through discomfort, you should do it. Or at least work out some way that's adjacent to it. As you gain experience, you'll begin to understand your body better and you won't have to question it as much. You will know the difference between, oh man, my leg hurts a little bit, I'll go light, and my leg is killing me, going to skip squats and do another exercise that doesn't put as much strain on my leg. Or maybe just, you know what, I feel like complete crap, I don't think I can work at all today. Sometimes that's going to happen. Like I said, I can't tell you what the difference between those three are. Really, no one but yourself truly knows what you feel. You're going to have to be the judge of that yourself. And realize that you're only cheating yourself if you decide to back off when you really didn't have to. I know it's such a cliche to say that, but it's true. You find yourself complaining about the fact you're fat, you have small legs, you don't like the way you look or feel, you can't run for more than 10 seconds, you have trouble getting out of bed despite being someone who should be able to do that. That's kind of all on you, really. Others can help you with the process and motivate you in their own way, but you've got to help yourself. If you're sick of it, you have to be the one that changes it. This isn't an opportunity that comes easily everywhere else in your life, but this is one of the most controllable variables of your life. You can always work out or at least live healthier. There's very, very few examples of where this may not be true, and it's not going to last forever. I also talked about this briefly in another section, but I wanted to expand on it here. Understand that these changes you are making are meant not just to be a phase or something you throw out after a week. This is meant to be a lifestyle change. That is why it's so important to make small changes and not just crash diet or work out 7 days a week while you start out. Rather, ease into it. You're going to have to do this for essentially the rest of your life. So do what you can to make it at least somewhat enjoyable for yourself. Or make it not as much of a burden as it may have been. As you get more into it and you do it for longer, it gets a lot easier, trust me. But that beginning month, 2 months, few months, whatever, can be extremely difficult. That's really it for mentality. It's pretty straightforward. Discipline is the key to success. Not that motivation doesn't help, but it isn't always there. So you need to be able to hold yourself accountable no matter how you feel. Understand what you're getting into and don't cower, but rather attack the challenge head on. Let's get into the last section. It should be pretty short and we can finish this all up. I thank you for sticking around with me for this long. I left this final segment open for me to be able to give any closing statements before I end the video. It's going to be kind of a list similar to what I did in the etiquette section. I'm not going to number them, but I'm going to let you know that this segment is mostly just comprised of additional information that didn't easily fit into other categories, or I felt like talking about on its own section. So it's going to be a little bit more of a jumbled mess, though there's still some organization. You'll be able to follow, don't worry. First, I want to talk about it. I think it's kind of important. Stretching and flexibility. Yes, this was going to be its own segment, but I decided to add it here. This was something I didn't really talk about as I was more speaking about weightlifting aspects of fitness. Though being flexible is usually just as important for people as it can make tasks easier. This can mean being more comfortable picking things up off the ground or being less likely to tweak something in certain positions. I highly recommend doing some form of stretching routine either in the morning or before bed, or both if you really want to. It can just be a few minutes, nothing over the top. Maybe a good yoga routine. I've actually heard people doing that. It proves a lot of things. I mean, it makes you more flexible. It Sort of just loosens you up before you go to bed. And it may seem weird to do it before bed, but think of all the times you've woke up with a sore neck, shoulder, or arm just because you were too tight and rolled around or something. It's happened to me 100 times. My neck will be sore in the morning, or my shoulder is really bad because I occasionally sleep on my side. So doing a little bit of stretching can make it less likely to happen. I also recommend a light dynamic warm-up before working out. Hip gaits, walking, quad/hip pulls, single leg tees, etc. I wouldn't recommend static stretching as it doesn't help you as much with explosive movements like weightlifting, but you can do them if you wish. I'd say that if you're going to do static stretching, such as pulling your arm across your chest, side-to-side lateral lunges, type, anything that's being held for a long period of time, I would say that's better to do post-workout rather than before your workout. Just to kind of stretch and loosen yourself up after a day of lifting and then going on about your day, whatever you're going to do. It's the best way of going about it. During your workout, I also recommend warming up your muscles for the set you're about to hit. I sort of glossed over it in the weightlifting and the gym section, but you should absolutely positively be warming up before your lift. Not just a couple of stretches, a couple of, wrist curls or whatever, but warming up the lift you're about to perform. So if you're working up to a 225-pound bench, just say that, maybe start with the bar and get the feel for the movement. Then do a plate, a little bit more resistance, and then 185 before finally getting to your set of 225. None of the warm-up sets need to be taken to failure or even really close to failure. I usually do 5 to 8 reps, and I feel completely fine. I feel like I can go all day pretty much. These are just to get your muscles primed for the movement, not to actually exhaust them. There is no real rule for what the weight has to be when you're warming up, but I recommend never making a bigger jump from warm-up to lift than warm-up to warm-up. What do I mean by this? Well, let's say you jump from 135 to 185. This is a jump I make often as well. That's a 50-pound jump. I would recommend not jumping from 185 to 245, for example. That's a 60-pound jump. Will your ligaments and joints explode if you do this? Probably not, I hope. But it's best to make smaller increments from your last warm-up to your actual lift than between warm-up sets. So if you're making 45-pound jumps or 90-pound jumps because of the plate, you shouldn't make a 95 or 100-pound jump from your last warm-up to your first working set. This does not mean you should just jump right into a super heavy weight. You should still have 2 to 4, if not a few more warm-up sets before your first real working set. And in case I didn't make it clear, a working set is your first actual set going to or close to muscular failure. It's your top set, your heaviest set. Just make sure you don't tire yourself out. You don't want to not be able to get as good of a stimulus from your actual weightlifting, but at the same time, you don't want to be going in cold. You don't want to injure yourself because you didn't warm up properly. The last little bit is just me wanting to touch on other training styles a little bit and some verbiage as well that you may hear in the fitness world. There are many different training styles. I would say most people follow a mix of training styles from strength training, bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic style weightlifting, though there are so many I could not possibly talk about them all. Just gonna kind of list a few of them, talk about them, just as possible avenues you might want to explore if you haven't already. First, you have good old-fashioned strength training. This is what I do. It's my personal favorite. I love it. This is unlike bodybuilding, powerlifting, and Olympic weightlifting because it does not require you to train a specific sport. Personally, I do it for baseball. That's what I strength train for, but football players strength train. Basketball players kind of strength train as well. Most athletes will strength train one form or another. I guess the closest would be strongman, but typically strongman has its own thing going on as well. I mean, if you want to lift heavy stones and just carry heavy shit, it's not a bad option, though it is kind of its own world in the strongman world. I don't know how to explain it. You can look into it if you want. Strength training, though, usually implies training mostly in the strength rep range. While rudimentary, typically when talking to someone about training, there are 3 main rep ranges: strength, hypertrophy, and endurance. When you train at all, you do get a bit of all 3. Though you can train in certain rep ranges, assuming you're going to or near muscular failure, which we discussed before, To bias one of these three, strength is often the 1 to 4 or 5 rep range depending on who you ask, with heavier weight in relation to what a person can lift. While not every exercise has to be trained in this rep range, compound movements such as squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, etc. will be performed at a lower rep range in order to force strength adaptation. The biggest thing that gets in your way is your CNS, your central nervous system. Training at higher weight requires a lot more effort, so when training heavier weight, your body will have to recruit more muscle fibers more efficiently in order to move said weight. This is why you'll see someone who looks like a string bean seemingly with ease lift a ton of weight. You've probably seen it yourself if you consumed any real gym content. I remember there was this guy, I don't know, he was like 60 kilograms and with ease picked up 550 pounds off the ground. I'm like, dude, what? It's not the best for hypertrophy, strength training that is, which is why if you want to strength train, I recommend doing accessories in other rep ranges as well. Strong muscles and big muscles, while separate, kind of, are not mutually exclusive. There is some crossover for sure. Having more muscle fibers to recruit is not a bad thing. Next, you have bodybuilding style of training. I won't say being a bodybuilder, as there is more that goes into being a bodybuilder than just the training, believe it or not. But you can train like them. This is the best for getting those full, big looking muscles. Typically trained in what's called the hypertrophy range. Technically hypertrophy, the stimulation of muscle growth, like muscle size that is well stimulated anywhere between 5 and 30 reps, though the golden range is usually considered 6 to 12 or 8 to 14 depending on who you ask. The point is, moderate weight, assuming you're going to muscular failure, with a moderate rep range. This also includes doing a lot of isolation, like bicep curls, shoulder press with dumbbells, machine work, etc., over compounds like deadlift and barbell bench. But just because you're doing bodybuilding doesn't mean you can't do compounds as well. RDLs and squats are still really common for bodybuilders to use, and I know a lot of bodybuilders still do like to do barbell bench in some way or another, though they typically bias incline bench. So just because you're doing this kind of training doesn't mean you have to 100% neglect compounds. It's a good style of training for most people, and I mean, if you want to compete, you can as well, though realize that it's extremely difficult. I don't recommend it for a new gym, like a gym beginner, but you can always look at that later in your career. You have endurance training, which, when it comes to resistance training, is most used by boxers and fighters in general, though it can be used by those who do endurance training of the aerobic kind, like marathon runners or cross-country athletes. Training in the 15 plus rep range is usually the golden standard for endurance training. It's called this because it builds up endurance. I know, it's shocking. You can stimulate hypertrophy in this rep range as well, but it is usually a lot harder to get to true muscular failure due to the intense muscle burn. That's usually what throws people off in the higher rep ranges, which is why they say 8 to 12, 6 to 12, 8 to 14, whatever number you want to use. It changes depending on who you ask, but a moderate rep range is better for most people because the muscle burn isn't as extreme. Though yeah, if you're interested in being an MMA fighter, a boxer, kickboxer, jiu-jitsu, whatever, I don't know, this may be a good style of training to follow. Powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting are very similar, don't tell them I said that, but they're also very different. Powerlifting is much more about raw strength, whereas Olympic weightlifting is a lot more about explosive power and technique. Not that all three of those aren't required amongst both of these sports. Powerlifting still requires technique and explosive power, and Olympic weightlifting still requires raw strength. But how I described it is how it's best split up. Powerlifting is squat, bench, deadlift. That being back squat, barbell bench press, and deadlift, though it can be in sumo or conventional style. Whereas Olympic weightlifting is clean and jerk as well as the snatch. Most people don't know these, so in case you don't, clean and jerk is where you clean the bar, so you pull it off the ground up to your shoulders in a front squat-like position, then thrust the weight overhead into what's usually a split stance. Though some people can squat it up, though I believe that's pretty rare, not many people do it that way. And then you hold it overhead. The snatch is where you skip the middle portion, where you just get a wider grip on the bar, and you go straight from the ground to overhead. Very difficult to do. I have a lot of respect for people who can do a lot of weight with that. These two styles of training I really only recommend if you have interest in competing. Though strength training, bodybuilding training, not competing unless you want, and endurance training are likely the best bets if you're solely interested in being healthy and want to be better at your sport. assuming there isn't a sport-specific program for you. That's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will respond to comments if you have any questions. I would love if you left a comment, even if you don't have any questions. There may be stuff I missed. This video took me from mid-September to recording this on November 23rd of 2024 currently, so it took me a while due to sports and school, so I apologize if I did leave anything out. Thank you, and I will see you all later.